Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to today's second half. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into tonight's second half, shall we? Today's first encounter. Believe it or not, these things happened, and I have never been able to explain them away. To briefly open, I am 60 years old, a stable homeowner, married for 26 years. I have raised one wonderful daughter, worked all my life, and paid all my taxes. I have a small, loyal circle of family and friends with a good reputation of honesty. I've never had hallucinations, however. I've always been open-minded about the natural world. I've always had a closer connection to animals than most people. Cats are especially drawn to me, and I love them. We still rescue strays when we can. I was 10 years old and living in El Paso, walking my German Shepherd, Nicky, on my usual route to the elementary school on a Saturday in broad daylight. We rounded a corner, and there was this gigantic black feline. I have owned and loved cats all my life, and I know a normal cat when I see one, and this was not a normal cat. These days, I label it a cryptid. It was crouched with its bottom in the air. It was enormously muscled, with a short Mannix cat tail. It had gigantic, strong hindquarters with extraordinary long hind feet. Its short, pitch-black fur gleamed with health. Its eyes were literally the size of tea saucers, round, golden, and calm. I, who know cats extremely well, would call it an amused stare. Definitely not a feline expression that I had ever seen until then or ever since. I do believe that cats possess a type of sense of humor, but it doesn't show that way in their eyes. It didn't show any aggression or any menacing body language. It just crouched there and laughed at us with its eyes. It didn't seem to be quite as long or as tall as my dog Nicky. It was crouched, so hard to tell. But I believed it weighed every bit as much as Nicky in sheer muscle mass, maybe 80 pounds. After a few transfixed seconds, Nicky proved herself a sensible fellow this time. He was a dog who tried to attack a coiled and rattling rattlesnake, and quite silently and methodically turned around and walked away, and I, still holding his leash, followed him in a kind of trance. Neither of us. Looking back, we walked steadily back to the school, straight up my block toward home, no straining or pulling on the leash whatsoever. When we were halfway up my block, my home street ended at the school, so it was across a small street and 4 houses up. I turned around and saw that giant cat had followed us to the top of the schoolyard. It stood crouched in that same position, rear end up, head turned to the side to look at us. On the low rock wall surrounding the school, watching us with its great round golden eyes. I never saw it move, but I know it must have, because it tracked behind us the whole way home. And I knew it could have easily caught us. Also, I know that Nicky must have heard and smelled it fouling, even if I did not, but he never gave a sign. I think maybe Nicky had saved at least his life, if not mine, by remaining so calm and I just followed him. That feline could have taken both of us out. In hindsight, the calmness of both Nikki and I seemed to add an integral type of mysticism to this encounter. To preempt the unusual questions, no, it was not an overgrown domestic manax, a mountain lion, a bobcat, a puma, a lynx, or any other type of wild feline. There are no pictures of that cat anywhere that I have ever seen, because I have been looking for years. This next encounter I'll try to keep compact, but it was complicated. My dorm friend at the University of Texas, Austin, and I walked to a small park as dusk was falling to practice our guitar. We had not taken or drunk any mind-altering substances. We were walking down a steep street when I noticed that down the sidewalk from us, someone had placed an impressive, true-to-life, life-sized statue of a German Shepherd dog right across the sidewalk facing the street, and completely blocking said sidewalk. I thought that was so odd, but my dorm mate didn't seem to be all that surprised, so I tried to shrug it off until we got a bit closer and realized that it was not a statue, but a real German Shepherd lying so motionlessly that only its breathing gave it away. Its legs stretched out in front of him, hind legs straight next to his rear, tail straight out behind him, and staring straight across the street with ears pricked forward. I was getting uneasy about this because the dog did not twitch an ear or move its head one bit to notice us as we approached from up the hill, just stared straight ahead. This didn't seem like normal behavior, and I told my dorm mate, who again shrugged it off. She had never owned pets, knew a little bit about them, and did not particularly like them. I, however, grabbed her arm and made her cross the street with me rather than get any closer. I looked at it across the street, and it didn't move. I stared as we walked by on the other side, and it was looking right in our direction, but I couldn't tell if it ever looked directly at us. I looked back at it as we proceeded down the hill, and it never moved. I stayed uneasy, but we left it behind, reaching a small park, and I climbed on the picnic table and proceeded to strum the guitars and sing. Shortly, a tiny striped manax cat appeared, not a kitten, but very small. Yes, it truly was another manax, same build as the giant one I saw in El Paso, with the long hind quarters and long back feet, stubby tail, but it was tinier than normal. It immediately began running around and around the picnic table, faster and faster. I was freaked again. I had no idea what it was doing. I had never seen a cat do it. Then it stopped, reversed itself, and started running faster and faster around the table in the opposite direction. Then it shot up a tree directly over our heads, crossed its paws, and laid its little head on its paws and looked directly into my eyes with golden eyes. Its expression was so wise, with a scary to me glint, that I interpreted as the time of anticipation. However, as I well knew, this was not a cat expression. They can be wise, and they can anticipate, but they do not express it through their eyes like humans do. I had enough. I felt like there was a bullseye pinned on me. I told my friend that I wanted to get out of there. When I told her why, she was puzzled. She felt nothing unusual about any of it. Night was falling, and I scanned the park around us, and lo and behold, about half a football field away, a creature sulked from behind some bushes, crossing a small space to disappear behind some more bushes. It was canine, but I can tell you now, it was not a recognizable dog to me. It was not shaped like a house dog, and it didn't move like a dog. It was much larger than a coyote. I had the impression of severe scruffiness. I could not see its face at all clearly, only that it was a weird, creeping, stomach low-to-the-ground canine. I had never seen a silhouette like that, including wolves that I have seen in books and zoos. Not much TV for me at that time. At that point, a figure of a man emerged directly from behind the bushes into which the canine had sulked. Night had almost fallen, but I could see that he was very tall, had long ratty hair and a long ratty beard. I could see his clothes were literally in tatters, and I could see that his fingernails were long on his hands and hung by his side. I couldn't see his eyes. He shambled, and I use that word correctly, implying some kind of walking disorder, directly towards us across the park. The canine did not reappear. I had heard no noises from the bushes at all, so I concluded he could not have been attacked by the canine in the few seconds they must have met behind the same set of bushes. As he came closer, I saw ratty hair and beard, his long fingernails, tattered clothing more clearly. Alarm bells are going off non-stop in my head. I decided that what we were seeing was a werewolf and took off running, leaving my friend behind. She followed. She ran out of the park, back to college. Finally, we were heading toward the dorm. We were crossing a very short sidewalk when I noticed that an old, arthritic, grizzled white dog was slowly crossing from the other side. I looked at it as it passed right by me, as I do all animals, and it stopped dead in its tracks, crouched awkwardly on all four legs, and stared directly into my eyes with totally blind eyes, milky blue and white with no pupils. I stared back unbelievingly, my heart thumping from running, and my mind was still shocked over what had just happened. And now it was still continuing with people and cars all around us. It craned its head to look over its shoulder at me, not turning its body, still in this awkward, painful-looking four-legged crouched position. I leapt away from it and headed for home. People did notice this incident and stared at the dog and me. At this point, I heard a horn blaring and whirling back around to see that a car had driven right up onto the crosswalk inches away and with lights full on the dog, and was honking and honking its horn to move it out of the road. It didn't seem to notice the car, the lights, or the horn. It just squatted, and it was still staring at me. People were standing and staring at this dog. I ran back to my dorm room and went to bed. It changed my life forever, but I stopped telling anybody. I had never heard of cryptids. I eventually concluded to myself that we ran into something to do with magic. I discovered cryptids finally several years ago and went straight to the internet. I can't find anything like these experiences I had online, but I'm thinking perhaps there was one or more of what are called shapeshifters, or maybe it was magic. Today's second encounter. This occurred around 1965. I was approximately 9 years old. I was playing in the kitchen with some army men while my parents were in the adjoining living room. It was dark outside, cool but not cold. It was probably mid-spring because the kitchen door was open with only the glass-lined screen door between me and the outside. I was about 10 feet from the door. There was a concrete porch that extended 4 feet out. A banister was also concrete that extended about 6 to 7 feet above the ground on the other side of the porch. We lived in the Northview section of Clarksburg, West Virginia. Northview was a typical suburb of middle-class America. We had neighbors just a few feet on all sides. There is the West Fork River, just about a half a mile from our house. There is a children's park about a block from my house that stretched a block or so from the river. The area was very light. As I was playing on the floor, I got the feeling that I was being watched. I looked up toward the glass-filled screen door. There I saw an odd-looking person. Its head was exposed to the top of its shoulders. I didn't notice any abundance of hair. Being a child and not considering any danger, I smiled, thinking it might be a friend of mine trying to fool me. It never occurred to me that it could possibly be something dangerous in our backyard. But the creature's eyes began to glow a red. In fact, its entire face was enveloped by this glow. I was suddenly overcome with a great fear and began to scream. My parents were soon by my side, but the creature had turned and apparently walked away. It appeared it walked toward my right. My parents could tell something had truly terrified me, and with that we all went on to the porch. For some reason, my mom and I walked off the porch, which was about 5 to 7 feet above the backyard, as it had a slope which lowered as the ground rolled towards the section of ground where the creature had just stood. In fact, the creature I saw stood on the lowest end of the slope, making the top of the banister approximately 6 feet from the ground. So my mom and I walked down the steps of the porch and onto the attached concrete patio. Now, it had just recently finished raining, so looking down, we both saw what looked like enormous footprints. My mom said to my dad, "My God, look." My father noticed prints and also what seemed to be deep impressions in the grass. He looked at my mother and said, "Take the boy in." Next, he followed me and my mom inside the house. My dad went into my parents' bedroom and soon came out with his military .45 handgun. He then went back outside. I begged him not to go, and I was very afraid until he came back in. He sat down but didn't say a word. No one ever talked about that incident until years later when I asked my mom. At the time I was 50 years old, my parents had divorced, and I found myself alone with my mom, as my family had visited her that day. Since we were alone, I took the opportunity to ask her a question I had wrestled with for many years. I asked my mom about the incident. She had been washing dishes with her back to me as I sat at the kitchen table. She stopped, turned her face to me, and said with a strange, nervous voice, "Do you still remember that thing?" I said, "Yeah," to which she responded with a stern, almost harsh voice, "Well, we don't talk about that situation." My mom loved to talk. She could go on about anything, and she was hardly ever rude when talking, yet without a doubt she was refusing to do so, so out of respect I let it go. Both my parents are now deceased, and I am up in age, 68, as of 2022. I'm retired from the state after 20 years as a state fraud investigator, with 7 years as a supervisor. I'm a minister and a well-respected member of a group of people with whom I associate. I believe I am perceived as a down-to-earth, level-headed person. I've only told this experience to family and an investigator with whom I worked. That's about 10 people. I told the investigator because he's an outdoorsman and I hope he'd have an answer. If you'd like to know what I think, I wish I'd never seen that thing. It's always been a bad shadow over my life. I've never got the image out of my mind. I'm still afraid of the dark, and I do not like being alone. That event has caused me nothing but fear my entire life. Tonight's third part of the upload. I've encountered Bigfoot. Heck, probably a pod of them based on how many we heard around us that night. Maybe something was with them and messing with them and used us as a distracting scent. But the encounter I'd like to share was definitely not a Bigfoot. To be honest, I have no idea what it was. To give you a reference point, it occurred on what some may call a major road, Route 33, that runs through George Washington National Forest in Rockingham County, Virginia, heading toward Pendleton County, West Virginia. I was coming home from work at the time. It was 11 p.m. The road was dark. I was alone on the road. To the right of me, the road was nothing but forest that runs back up into the mountains with an occasional break where creeks come down. And to the left of me was a river that ran along the road for a good portion of that drive. Now and then a cut, or a dirt road, opened onto the main road where people or hunters had basically created a side road. The night was sort of bright in addition to the light of my headlights cast to the side of the road. My windows were up and my doors were locked. My driver's side window was slightly cracked. This will become important a bit further down. I had just crossed over one of the small creeks when I thought I saw something's shadow appear next to my passenger side window, sort of a smoky looking at first. Then something slapped my door and started smacking the door handle. At the same time, this smoky image solidified and became a goat-like image that was running next to my car. It was running on its hind legs with red eyes, and it was grabbing the door handle as if it was trying to open the door, the whole time keeping pace with me as I sped up trying to get away from this thing. I saw it was goat-like because it was more thin and heavy, sort of a brownish in color. I can't be positive due to the light. No muzzle like a wolf or a dog, more of a flattish face. It had smallish horns, but it could have been its ears jutting forward. Strange thing, though, was as I looked, figure keeping my eyes on the road as I drove, it also appeared to sort of fade in and out, like it was there one minute, gone the next, only to reform. It sure left some scratches on my door, though, no immediate sounds while it was next to the car. But once it stopped chasing me, there were some strange howls behind me. Ironically, though, it only chased me from one creek to another. It stopped just before the road started to climb up that mountain. There's been a few unusual accidents in that area resulting in deaths. It's a very lonely stretch of road driven at night. Since it's in a national forest, no one lives in the immediate area. It's been more than 10 years since this event occurred. I no longer drive that stretch of road. I heard a howl a few more times after that night going through there, but never that close again. I drove that road a number of years after and never heard it again or saw it again. I still don't know what it was, or if anyone else outside of my family had ever encountered it. I don't talk about it as the norm. I've also been informed by immediate family members that they have heard, felt, and encountered something along that stretch of road. Tonight's fourth part of the upload. Nobody's going to believe me when I say this, but I encountered a juvenile Sasquatch when I was young. My mom used to leave us at Green River in Kentucky to go fishing on the weekends with my little brothers. We would go camping, and my mom would drive up north for the weekend. This is back when we didn't have cell phones or anything. My mom always told us never to go past the tree line because there are homeless people. We always believed that because we lived in the city and had moved to the country. And they always talk about how the homeless people are in the tree lines, are always yelling and banging on trees. So we were always scared of them. We're down there fishing and we'd run out of bait. I want to say the last day of being there. We were leaving later in the afternoon. I had to go to the tree line. I wanted to flip rocks, everything I could find, worm grubs, because the carp were everywhere. You could see them, and we wanted to get some worms to have a better chance of catching them. So I told my brothers to stay put. I'm going to go look for bait. Well, I didn't expect to experience what I experienced. I was walking with my head down, looking for something to flip over. Then I saw feet, like human feet, right in front of me. I see toenails that look like wood. Okay, I started to look up and see hair on the body, but there was also parts of the body that didn't have hair. As I looked at this creature, it's not even 10 feet from me. It's like we both ran into each other by accident, and we were both startled. I looked in its eyes, and its eyes were like galaxies, colored brown and green, also reddish, blackish, just huge eyes. You don't know what you're looking at when you see these colors or this creature. When this creature backs up into the sunlight, maybe 3 steps backward, and when the sunshine hit its fur, it was kind of invisible. Seriously, the way the sun reflected its fur in front of my eyes. As I'm looking at this creature in the shade, stepping back 3 times, it disappeared right in front of me. Let me remind you, this is not even 20 feet after we first encountered each other. I can see why people don't see these things. Sometimes we don't know what we're looking for. Our eyes are registering something else. I still get chills when I think about this. I was scared to death, and I thought it was a homeless man. I don't know what I was looking at. I never knew of Bigfoot. My mom talked about wood boogers because she grew up in the country. I was confused. I was freaked out. I couldn't even move. I wanted to go for my brothers. I tell you, as soon as I blinked my eyes, my loss of vision was right in front of me, even though I knew where it was. 20 years later, I'm obsessed with Bigfoot, and I've never gotten to tell my experience. I'm so scared of the outcome if I go camping and experience something way worse because I said something. I know that there are people who are going to believe this, and ones who don't. I completely understand why, if I could give you my eyeballs that day, you could see for yourself. This thing cloaked itself like the predator in the movie right in front of me, but not fully cloaked. If I hadn't walked into this creature, I probably would have never even seen it in the sun. So what I'm saying is, if we didn't bump into each other and he was just standing there in the sun, I would have never even noticed him. That's how they camouflage themselves. The sun reflects off their fur. Since we bumped into each other, I had my eyes on him as he backed up and as the sun made him turn kind of invisible. I know it's hard to explain, and I'm sick of feeling like I'm crazy. I don't want attention. I don't want to go on podcasts. But what I experienced messed with me hard when I was growing up. My whole life, I thought it was a homeless person until about a year and a half ago. I got interested in Bigfoot, and then I started listening when people were saying they had the same type of encounter. But I actually saw this creature back into the sun and disappear. This creature did not stink or anything. That's why I thought it was just a homeless person at the time. Remind you, I was 10 years old. Maybe I was worried about my little brothers at first, and then the thought of my mom telling me not to go to the tree line. So I felt like I was invading their space. Well, I finally shared my experience. I feel like I got a big rock lifted off my chest. I have seen this thing in my sleep ever since that day, as I was a little boy. Until this day, I know exactly where I was at, and I know exactly where I was standing, even though I sometimes question my sanity and situation. I thought about going back several times, but I don't need to because I know what I saw. I can't tell you if they're harmless or if they're not, or if they're dangerous, but the creature I saw was trying to get away from me. I hope this helps someone that is struggling with their encounter. It's okay. It doesn't matter if people don't believe you. There are people that do. Today's final part of the upload is that scientific finding, and the photo that you are seeing is the Flores man. Between about 700,000 years ago and 60,000 years ago, a diminutive early human walked the island of Flores in what is now Indonesia. Homo floresensis, nicknamed the Hobbit because it stood about 3.5 feet tall, was small-brained, large-footed toolmaker. No one knows where it evolved from. Now, one anthropologist is arguing that no one really knows that H. florensis went extinct, and that it may have survived into modern day. In a new book, Gregory Forth, an anthropologist retired from the University of Alberta, argues that reports of an ape man in Flores could be sightings of the ancient human ancestors still kicking today. We simply don't know when this species became extinct, or indeed, I dare say, we don't even know if it is extinct, Forth told Live Science. So there is some possibility that it is still alive. Needless to say, this is a dramatic claim, and experts who studied H. florensis are skeptical. Flores is an island that is about the same area of Connecticut and has 2 million people living on it today, said John Hawks, a paleoanthropologist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The population is spread out across the island, he adds. Realistically, the idea that there is a large primate that is unobserved on this island and surviving in a population that can sustain itself is pretty close to zero, Hawks told Live Science. Forth sees it differently. He has been doing anthropology fieldwork on the island since '84, and since that time has heard local stories of small, hairy, humanoid creatures living in the forest. He wrote about these tales in his research until 2003, when H. florensis was discovered. It was then, he told Live Science, that he made the connection. I heard about these similar small human-like creatures in the region called Lyo, which are said to still be alive, and people were giving accounts of what they look like, Forrest said. In one excerpt, opens in new tab from his new book, Between Ape and Human, an anthropologist's on the trail of a hidden hominoid, Pegasus Books 2022, Forth describes an interview with a man who says he disposed of a corpse of a creature that could not have been a monkey, but that was also not a human, with straight light-colored hair on its body, a well-formed nose, and a stub of a tail. Over the years, Forth collected 30 eyewitness accounts of similar creatures that, he said, match the description of H. florensis. Of course, there are many eyewitness accounts of cryptid creatures around the world, such as Sasquatch in the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia, said Mark Collard, an evolutionary anthropologist based at Simon Fraser University in Canada. Humans are adept at telling and believing stories, Collard told Live Science, and those stories can easily become central to people's beliefs. The tales of these ape men on Flores are different from these Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest, Forth argued, because there have never been a non-human ape in North America. But Flores, he said, H. florensis, undoubtedly did exist. But how long did they exist? H. florensis bones were first found in Liang Bua Cave in Flores in 2003. The youngest evidence of a hobbit using the cave dates back to 50,000 years ago, said Elizabeth Veitch, a zoo archaeologist at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History who studies the species. Modern humans do not appear on Flores until 47,000 years ago, Veitch told Live Science. There is no evidence that the two species overlapped at Liang Bu Cave. In fact, H. florensis wasn't using the site much after 60,000 years ago, she said. Based on faunal evidence, there was likely an environmental change that occurred around 60,000 years ago that altered the landscape around the cave, which caused Homo florensis to migrate elsewhere on the island and forage in a more suitable habitat. 2014, archaeologists discovered another site on Flores, Matamage, with a fossil mandible and teeth of a hominin dating back to about 700,000 years. These bones are thought to be from a far older population of H. florensis. Stone tools were also found at the site. These findings suggest that H. florensis had a long history on Flores. The species has not been found anywhere other than the island, but anthropologists and archaeologists have seen no indication that the Hobbit lived alongside modern human. It is possible that they did for a time, Thompson said, and if so, perhaps the stories of the Lyo region of Flores are a very deep cultural memory. In Australia, Indigenous people have stories that clearly correspond to real events that occurred thousands of years prior, including a dramatic meteor strike. Something similar might have happened on Flores, Thompson states. What we might have is a situation where H. florensis potentially persisted in mythology for a really long time, she told Live Science. But Thompson, too, was skeptical that a 3-foot-tall primate could go largely undetected on Flores until modern day. We do turn up species that we think are extinct in science. It happens, she said, but it's small things. It's not something that would be so noticeable. Collard agreed. I think we have to be very cautious with oral history, he said. I think it has value, but it has to be approached skeptically. That's not to say that H. florensis isn't mysterious. The two sites containing bones and tools from the primate date hundreds of thousands of years apart from each other, leaving a huge gap in history. Researchers do know that the Hobbit used cobbles to make sharp stone flakes, knife-like tools that could have been used to cut plants or meat or carve other tools out of wood. Hawk says it's unknown whether H. florensis used fire or hunted large prey. Perhaps the biggest question about H. florensis is where the species came from. Anatomically, the Hobbit has teeth that look much like those of other Homo species, such as Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. H. florensis presence in Indonesia, some 700,000 to 800,000, predates Homo sapiens' arrival by a huge margin. Homo erectus, though, left Africa 1.8 million years ago and popped up on what is now the island of Java before H. florensis in the fossil record. This raises the possibility that the Hobbit descended from Homo erectus and perhaps that evolved a small body size as a result of the island living, a phenomenon called island dwarfism. But there are problems with that hypothesis. For one, Thompson told Live Science, Homo erectus survived on other islands in Southeast Asia at its usual size until about 115,000 years ago, and it would be odd for island dwarfism to occur only on Flores and nowhere else over hundreds of thousands of years. And H. florensis has many anatomical features, such as its shoulders and wrists, that look less like its Homo cousins and more like early human ancestors, such as Australopithecus. The anatomy does not make it clear, Hawk said. The anatomy evidence suggests that Homo florensis could have been a descendant of human ancestor that left Africa before Homo erectus, Collard said. If so, scientists haven't yet found archaeological evidence for who that ancestor might have been or when they left. Whatever the story of the journey, it must have been incredible. Tiny H. florensis or its ancestors somehow made it across continents and rough open water to land on an island of Flores. There has always been open water there, Collard said, even as sea levels rose and fell over hundreds of thousands of years. Evidence of other early hominids, such as the Philippines, Homo luzonensis, discovered in 2019 on the island of Luzon, suggests that human ancestors doing far more than anthropologists and archaeologists ever believed possible. Was it accidentally rafting situation, or was it a deliberate rafting situation, Collard said. It seems unlikely, but were they able to use boats? What researchers in human origins are now learning is that the interactions between early populations of Homo species were extraordinarily complex. It's now common knowledge that Homo sapiens and Neanderthal interbred, and that Neanderthal DNA persists in modern humans. Humans in Oceania and East Asia also interbred with another human ancestor, Denisovians, about which little is known. Remarkably, Hawk said, Denisovians' genes persist in East Indonesian populations, suggesting that these human relatives were also living on these islands. No fossil record has been found of the Denisovians in eastern Indonesia thus far. However, the oldest cave art on record also comes from Indonesia in the form of a red pig painted on the island of Sulawesi 45,000 years ago. This art may have been made by Homo sapiens. There is no evidence that humans and H. florensis ever interbred. Scientists haven't found any unknown genes in modern Indonesia genome that could hail back to the little hominin. The timing of the fossils that have been found suggests that the Hobbit could have been living happily on Flores until modern humans showed up and wiped it out. Inadvertently or not, Hawk said. It's very plausible that modern humans are responsible for its extinction. Or perhaps there are newer H. florensis fossils waiting to be found that will prove that the two Homo species overlapped. The last decade has been a golden age for Indonesian archaeology and international collaborations between local scientists and the rest of the world, Hawk said. It's almost certain that more discoveries are to come. The fact that we only have a handful of sites that represent almost a million years of habitation of some of these places tells us there was a whole lot we have not found. And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed today's second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps the channel growing and going, and honestly what gives us a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we all deserve, and that is because of all of you, so thank you. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.